Are we ready? Okay. Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Reed Price. I'm the director of the Senior Community Center, and we are very happy once again to be hosting a City Council Candidates Forum. We represent about 1,500, a little more than that, seniors on Bainbridge Island, and seniors are people who are 50 or older, and we have an active program here, and we are very happy to include in that program advocacy, which is giving an opportunity for public conversation, and we have a lot of programs that I think if you aren't currently a member, I suggest you check us out at biseniorcenter.org. The moderator for today's program is Bill Luria, who is the president of the board of directors. So I'd just like to introduce Bill before we get started.
Thank you. First of all, thank you all for attending and for the candidates to attend. When we announced that this was going to be an in-person, the demand was overwhelming. But unfortunately, because of COVID restrictions, we've limited to this number of attendees. But we're fortunate enough that we're going to be live streaming this and having it available on demand. So I want to thank Sal Sorolia and Pascal Schubach over there, who's making the streaming and the podcasting available. I think why don't we get going? We have only 2 hours, and there are 8 of you, and let's get going.
Okay. Also, I'd like to give a personal thank you to my son-in-law, Justin Lin, who is going to be keeping time for us. So he'll let you know at 30 seconds, and then it's over. Turn off your phones, please, because we're sharing Wi-Fi right now, I think.
All of you here, your microphone is picking up your cell phone. Even if you get a text message or it's on silent, we can hear it. Turn our phones off. Got serious.
And can you guys hear me now? Okay, thanks. Before we get into the specific issues, and there'll be a lot of them, we'd like to get to know all of you a little bit better. But one request, if we could avoid all those easy political cliches that we hear over and over again, I'm an environmentalist, or I'm a fiscal conservative, or one of my favorites, I'm a consensus builder. We've heard this way too many times. What we'd like to do is just focus on who you really are. So the specific question, what particular skills do you have and what particular experiences have you had that you feel would make you an effective council member? And I'm going to be going through back and forth and try to get everyone having different times to do this. So we'll start with Joe.
Just one quick question. How long are responses?
2 minutes for this question.
Bill, can I take my mask off?
I think it's okay.
Yeah, thank you.
When you speak, you can take the mask off so we all could hear you.
Okay, thank you.
And Justin will be our timer.
Okay, great. Well, first off, thank you, Senior Center, for putting this on. It's great to be here. Great to see all of you. Yeah, I'm Joe Dietz. I'm your District 7 North Ward representative on the City Council, and I'm running for a second term. My background, very quickly, I have a background in investment finance and a background in clean energy. And I've been very active in the community, doing clean energy projects. The City Hall Community Solar Project was a project I did. And then in 2017, I decided to run for council. And I was thankfully elected, and now I'm back for a second term. So why am I back for a second term is because I love this community. This is a wonderful place to live, grow up. I've lived here longer than anywhere else my whole life, and I hope to retire. And I have a child, I shouldn't say child, there's a young woman, she's a sophomore at Bainbridge High School who's at the football game right now. So I am running for office because there's First off, I like this job. I believe I'm doing a good job as a council member, and I'm happy to go into the details in this forum. But Bainbridge has challenges. We have a climate crisis that is upon us. We had the driest summer on record this last summer. We need to adapt to this changing climate. We also need to adapt to the pandemic that is ongoing, continuing. We need to adapt to our housing crisis. We have a lack of affordable housing. So I have the skills. I'm sorry. 30 seconds. Thank you. 30 seconds. I think that might be upside down. I have the skills in each one of these areas, and I'm happy to go into the details during this forum as to what I'm doing in each of these areas and what you can expect from me in my second term. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Ron? Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here, and I appreciate the Senior Center putting on this event. My name is Ron Peltier. I grew up on Bainbridge Island. My family moved here in 1965, and I've been a carpenter on the island. I like to think of myself as a little bit of a Renaissance man, and that I'm interested in a lot of things, from tending my orchard to writing and philosophy and playing my guitar and singing. I was on the City Council for 4 years, from 2016 to 2019, and you just never know how a life experience is going to translate into City Council. But what I do a lot of with my carpentry business is problem solving, where somebody will have issues with a house. I do a lot of repairs, and it takes some creative thinking to come up with strategies to fix things. As a council member, I feel like I was very effective in helping to find solutions for problems that were identified. The main problem that when I came into office was clear cuts. People were really concerned about residential lots that were being completely clear cut. I worked with other council members and planning commission members to find a solution to that. I think we found the only solution using low impact development in critical areas. Now, when I look at what I want to see in a council member, I want to see somebody who's good at problem solving, actually get in and does the work, because you can't depend on the city staff to do all the work. And somebody who will set politics aside, who doesn't grandstand, who isn't there because they want to be part of an exclusive club, but because they actually want to do good things in the community. And when I looked at the incumbent, I thought that somebody needs to challenge the incumbent because he doesn't fit those criteria that I expect of a good council member. So that's my introduction, and I'm looking forward to the other questions.
Yeah. Brenda?
Hello, my name is Brenda Fairchild Johnson, and I'm running for the District 2 position in the North Ward. Is that too loud? Okay. I have a loud voice. So I guess I'm probably an outliner here. I don't think that it takes any special skill to be a city council person. I think what you need to have is compassion, and you have to have interest, and you have to be a good listener. Because we shouldn't have our own agendas. We should be trying to understand what our constituents want and pushing that forward. I have a background in listening to people. I'm in information security, and my job is to tell people what they can't do. And nobody likes to hear that. So I have to be compassionate as to why they can't do what they need to do. We can't impede the business. We have to make the business continue to work. So we have to do it in partnership. It comes with negotiation, and it comes with back and forth, making sure we have the right people in the room so that we can get the job done. And so I don't think you have to be a leader or someone who's lived here forever. I've been here for 15 years, and it really takes somebody who, once you realize that everything the city council does impacts you, and then you need to jump in and get involved. And that's what happened to me. So I think anybody can do that.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
My name is Chris Smith. Excuse me. My name is Chris Smith, and I am running for council in Ward 2. My wife Carrie and I have been 28-year residents of Bainbridge Island. I grew up in an Air Force family, living in all the locations from Alliance to South Carolina, earned a political science degree in constitutional law from the University of Arkansas and an MBA from the University of Utah. After college, I served in various classified missions in the Army in Europe and back in the United States. I completed my military service as a captain in the 82nd Airborne Division. And then I'm proud to say that my son, and children speak a lot about you, and my son completed a family tradition of military service by serving 5 years in the military as a Marine. Following the military, I spent 30 years at IBM in various sales and sales management positions. And that's where I learned a great deal, not just about leadership, which is large to learn in the military, but also teamwork. So following that, I became a flight instructor, and I continued to share my passion for flying, and retained my airline transport pilot rating in 2016, and my FAA Gold Seal flight instructor in 2020. And that what brings me to the service to leadership and the attention that I paid to and shown my service should qualify me for running for council.
Thank you, Chris. Rasham?
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for coming today. It's really nice to see everyone's faces. I really appreciate the fact that we're here in person. Thanks to everyone also who's tuning in via the live stream on YouTube. My name is Rasham. I'm currently serving on the City Council, currently serving since 2021 as mayor of the council. When I ran in 2017, I ran on a platform of change. The primary complaint that I heard from constituents at that time, which hadn't changed, is that the administration, our city, did not seem to reflect or seemed out of alignment with the will and the values of our constituencies. I'm here to tell you that after 4 years, I have developed the knowledge and the skills and the expertise to actually understand what those constituents mean when they say there's a problem at City Hall. Problems with the planning department and the regulatory hurdles ordinary property owners need to jump through just to permit simple things. Problems with leadership in our executive department seemingly prioritizing large-scale development and expensive and environmentally wasteful capital improvement projects over serving the everyday needs of island residents such as yourselves. And lastly, and most importantly, the problem with millions of dollars, taxpayer dollars, your taxpayer dollars, literally walking out the door. I want to serve another 4 years because it's taken me 4 years to identify these problems and begin the work to begin to change, to bring the change that we need so that those problems do not continue to occur and repeat into the future. I want another 4 years, serve another 4 years so that when I do step off the dais, I'm leaving a city that is healthy and well, a city that serves your needs over special interest, a city that responds well to the development pressures that we're constantly facing, to the pressures of climate change. I can do that. I've done it for 4 years. My voting record can prove that, and that is what I can offer you that my opponent cannot, because I have the experience, also the knowledge and the bravery to continue to push an administration in the direction that we all need to see it go. Thank you.
Thank you. Clarence?
One? Good. Hi, thank you, and again, thank you to the Senior Center for inviting us. My name is Clarence Moriwaki, and public service has been part of my DNA ever since I was the state's first and only 12-year-old Eagle Scout. I moved here about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, and fell in love with this community. And part of that DNA is serving the community, and I joined many, many organizations right now, serving as the president of the Bainbridge Island Japanese American community, and I was one of the founders and current vice president of our only National Historic Site, the Bainbridge Island Japanese American Exclusion Memorial. I set and toned that entire strategy to create that. And I also served on several other boards, the Bainbridge Island Health, Housing, and Human Services Council, the Marge Williams Center, the Wyckoff Superfund Acquisition Task Force, later became the Friends of Pritchard Park, the Salary Commission, and so many others that I am running out listing. And one thing that I love about those services, and I can ask anybody who served with me on any one of those boards or commissions, and they'll tell you I'm someone that can bring people together truly, that I'm someone that is trustworthy, that I've had integrity, and I work to get the job done. The accomplishments speak for themselves. We do have Pritchard Park. Marge Williams Center is a beautiful place to nurture nonprofits. These are the kind of things that I like to contribute to the community. Tangible things that actually help, actually move our community forward. And the reason why I'm running for city councilor are threefold. One, I want responsible, predictable, ethical government. Two, I believe we have to have smart growth that also balances with the quality of life we all enjoy. And three, I'd like to see a diverse community. Our demographic mix be much more representative of social, economic, racial, religious, and the LGBT community. And those are the things I would like to see accomplished should you elect me to city council.
Thank you. John?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be people together in one place, looking at one another, listening. Just talking. Yeah. How's that? Okay. If I'm elected to the city council, it will be the culmination of many years of service in other capacities. Most recently, 9 years on the Planning Commission. I learned a great deal on the Planning Commission. I learned about how the Planning Commission and Council can work together. They don't communicate, or they haven't in the past communicated as well as could be done. Things get hung up after the Planning Commission recommends something. It can fall flat if the Council doesn't take the issue up and finish the work. Sometimes it's best done with some give and take. We saw the subdivision standards revised from the ground up, and I worked closely with Christy Carr in that process as the standards were rewritten in the Planning Commission and then presented to the Council. And the Council did a good job of making some modifications, again, with back and forth. But we don't have as much of that as we need, especially when it comes to housing policies. There's been potential within the Planning Commission for more work than we've ever gotten done because we just haven't had the full cooperation of the Council. I hope to improve on all of those relationships that the Council needs to be actively engaged, dynamically engaged with the citizen groups and so on. So.
Thank you, John. Kent?
Hi again, thank you to the Senior Center, Reed and Bill, for making this work, and it's nice to see all of you. It's been a while since I've seen some of your faces just due to COVID. My name is Kent Scott. I'm running for District 3 South Ward. I'm a 33-year resident of the island, and like all of you, I've seen a lot of change, and it's kind of daunting in a way that people want to pull up the drawbridge when some of the change has been fine, some of the change hasn't been, and I think some of the candidates have spoken to the need to improve the quality of change, and this is partially aligning the comp plan with land use, which has been identified as a major problem. But a little bit about my background. While I have been on island for a long time, we raised a family on island. I ran to the boat like many of you did for decades. And it's part of, I think, being on council is understanding what it is to be on island as a member that's raised a family and has commuted to the island and has done all their shopping on island and also seen change. But besides the personal side, I've spent 40 years in professional planning, design, and construction, working throughout the U.S. and in Asia. What that work included was mixed-use development, multifamily development, affordable housing development, public and civic spaces, and also destination, interpretive, and education facilities. All of these things included an incredible amount of public process and included dialogue with citizens, agencies, governments, stakeholders, developers. I have the experience to bring that knowledge to bear on council with looking at what needs to happen for change on the island. I would add a couple things that have been, and just echo what's been said before. One of the key things that we need to do is not just manage change and to be sure that it's consistent with the comp plan that we have a rural environment, but also economic diversity on the island through affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. Let's get started with one of the more contentious issues facing the council, the new police court facility. After close to, almost 10 years of discussions, planning, and studies, and the expenditure of $11 million, including almost $9 million to purchase the Harrison facility, we seem to be back to square one. Nothing has happened. Are we starting over again? So the question, and I'm going to start with Chris, you'll be the first one. Do you support moving forward with the Harrison facility plan? And if so, why? Or if you oppose moving forward with the Harrison facility, why not? And what of the $9 million spent to purchase the building? And we'll do 2 minutes per answer.
Just to be clear, what was the name of the facility again that you broke up a little bit?
The Harrison Hospital facility that the city had purchased for almost $9 million.
Okay. Yeah, I think that it should be revisited. There is no question.
Could you put it closer?
There is no question that the police station needs to be changed out. There's no question about that. Now, one of the things that I want to bring to the table here is it's important to do the right thing. Okay? It's also important to do things right. And I think that the right thing to do was to look at changing out the police station. However, is the Harrison facility the right thing? I can't see how a hospital can be converted into a police station. I also have a hard time understanding how a hospital could be converted into a co-located police station and fire station. It's my perspective, by the way, for fire stations to be located more tactically around the island. So I'm not 100% sure that the Harrison facility, I know that it came into consideration. Lots of people have all kinds of different ideas about how it got looked at in the first place. It appeared to me when I looked at it that there was going to be a lot of work to be done to get it converted that may or may not turn out as optimally as building from scratch. So I'm really at a loss to figure out what it is that we could do with the Harrison facility. I know it's ours, I know we have it, and I know we're probably going to have to bite the bullet and go forward with it. But I just hope, in addition to doing the right thing on that side, that we do that the right way. Thank you.
Thank you. Brenda?
Yes, I was given a lot of information on this when I first started on council, and it came from all different directions. And I'm a firm believer that you can make numbers look any way you want them to look if you're in charge of them. It's called spreadsheet manipulation. I think we need to move cautiously on this. We need to have outside people look at what we've done and tell us what happened, because there's so much information, so much history, that I'd like to know what the real story is. And that being said, our police station is not adequate. I've had experience to go there, not as a criminal, but it was not a good experience. It's a small space, and it's just very confined. And I have to tell you, the next day, the officer came to my house, and I felt so much better talking to him. So it's not a place that is conducive to conduct business. And so that being said, we do need to make a decision, but we need to try to find out what it is that we need. Do we even know what we need? And so I'm a proponent of trying to do some sort of assessment to find out what would the, I see, thank you. What would a new police station look like, and what does the community think we need? You know, I don't want to get into what's right and what's wrong. I'm more into what do we need.
Thank you, thank you. Clarence, why don't we go with you?
Thank you. I do support the facility wholeheartedly. This is something that needs to really change. Current structure for the police building was built in World War II or right after 1945, and is a structure that's masonry will fall over in an earthquake. And our municipal court is like 12 storage units that have been remodeled that we rent, by the way. And so you're going to hear a lot of numbers and a lot of figures, of which I'd like to see justification for. It's the most expensive police station in the history of the world, or how much it is. So I like to do common sense talking. So let's say this, instead of a building, we're talking about a 1945 Buick that is held together with bubble gum and baling wire. And somewhere along the path, we also started renting a car, let's say a 1980 Buick. And so we've been holding these buildings. We finally came around to the point we need to have a new car. So there were a couple of cars to purchase from. We picked one. We took out a loan, and now we're starting to remodel that car to fit the 21st century. Then along, some people say, well, maybe we spent too much on that car, so let's revisit it. Let's go to Car Gurus and Consumer Reports. Well, fair enough, but here are the three choices. The three choices that came through from the city manager's report: remodel the current police station, go with Harrison, or go with a new facility. So you have remodel the old car, keep the one you got, or build a car. You're going to build a car. These options just really don't work. It's really not common sense, because this structure is unsound. And quite frankly, I'm grateful to the police department for showing up in the municipal court, because it doesn't show any pride in community. There's also something about civic pride. We should have something that says, this is how we feel about our government. This is the kind of place that makes you feel safe when you go to court. This is a place that we can secure our police vehicles. We just got to get in that garage, turn that car on, put it in drive, and move forward.
Thank you. Risham?
Yes, thank you. In my opening comments, when I mentioned the fiscal waste of the city, taxpayer dollars literally walking out the door, I was really talking about Harrison. There's no debate as to whether or not the city overpaid for that building. The city overpaid. The question is by how much? 5 million or 9 million? I don't care by how much. It was millions. And that's important, and we need to investigate that. Why? Because we need to make sure that decisions like that are never made again, because that's your money. And when we talk about funding for facilities like these ones, when we talk about funding for essential health and human services, funding that everyday Bainbridge Island citizens talk about, that's the funding that just walked out the door. Health and Human Services funding has been funded at the level of $330,000 every year for every year that I've been on the council. That number has not increased. But we spent $9 million to buy a medical building to convert to a police station. Ask any builder, architect, or construction worker on this island and beyond whether that was a good financial decision, and they will tell you no. In fact, most of whom I've spoken to have laughed at the city for what they've done. It is an embarrassment. We have a responsibility to you to investigate why that happened so we can guarantee it never happens again. Moving forward, there are options. This is not common sense. Common sense is, let's take a pause to see how we should best move forward. That's common sense. Common sense would have been not to buy the building in the first place, but I lost that vote. So what do we do moving forward? We take the dollar per square foot average of building police and court facilities in this region, and we see if it fits at the existing site. And then what should we do with Harrison? That's where you all come in. I like the idea of turning it into a community health care clinic. I like the idea of turning it into senior housing. That makes sense to me, because you know what the numbers say? The numbers suggest we can have two for the price of one, and why wouldn't we do that? Because bad decisions were made, and we have an obligation as elected officials not to hold our past leaders accountable. I strongly disagree with that. This is one of the reasons I'm running for re-election. I'm happy to talk with any of you further about this offline. Thank you.
Thank you. Kent?
Wowee, that's super fiery, and I agree with almost everything Risham said. But let me just add a couple of things that I think are really vital. You know, first, do I support the automatic, ongoing, and complete construction of Harrison as a police department? Absolutely not. And one of the reasons, there's two basic reasons. One is we don't know what our policing needs are. And, you know, people have spoken to this, and I expect more will. We have to understand what our policing needs are on this island. And if all of you read the town hall transcript about policing on the island that came out a few months ago, I mean, it's pretty startling what police actually respond to. I mean, it's 911 hang-up calls, and it's people who don't have tabs on their car or lights out. While it may be relevant to have as many police as we have, I don't see the need right now, and I think we need to look carefully at what our policing needs are. For those of you like me who were here before incorporation, as you recall, the sheriff came on island twice a week for half a day. And I don't know what our total police force is now, well in excess of 31. And you know, Bainbridge is pretty darn safe. I don't know if you guys lock your doors. I don't. I keep my keys in the car. I mean, it's a very different environment, I think, than standard policing will allow. But there was another really interesting thing, and that's that we all saw the fire department put up 3 new buildings recently. They spent $18 million, 3 new buildings. We're on the cusp of spending $30 million for a remodel of an existing building. So I think that there are clearly things that need to be investigated, need to be looked at carefully. We need to look at what our policing needs are, and we need to know if, in fact, Harrison makes any financial sense.
Thank you. John?
Yes. The way I come into this is, how is the decision going to be made? I believe it's a decision to be made by the council in consultation with the city manager. I think that as things now stand, the council needs to hear more from the city manager in terms of his judgment, because he accepted the responsibility before he even arrived here of taking charge of investigation and identifying the options, laying out the pros and cons of different possibilities. So I expect the council, whether it's done within this calendar year or after the new council members are seated, I expect the council to be working through a decision-making process with the city manager's expertise and the opinions that he has taken into account from, let's say, impartial and expert judgment. So we have a limited number of options. I tend to think that the Harrison option is the best one, but I'm not well enough informed to say that's where I would go.
Thank you. Ron?
Thank you. I've been around long enough to see, having seen this process of deciding where to build a new police and court facility, go through a lot of iterations. And I'm sure that some of you are very frustrated by that process. I see our former mayor, Ann Blair, here, and I know that she went through a lot of things with the where to build a police facility. And I would like to see us get something done and not have this go on for another few years, because it really, what it does is it shows dysfunction in our city government, that we can't work together and make decisions. And when it comes to the police facility, it's not going to be a perfect decision. I was opposed to the Harrison location. I don't think it's a good location, but we bought it when we paid too much for it. Should there be some accountability? I think so, but I don't think that that should be part of the process deciding where we're going to build the facility. So I think the first step is that we need an independent assessment as to what our policing needs are. We shouldn't be doing that in-house. It shouldn't be the city manager or the police chief deciding what we need. We do know that we need a new facility. But we need to move forward on something. We need to get our council working together, set aside all of the politics, and let's show the community that we can actually make a decision. And I would be prepared to move forward with Harrison if it made sense, if we get back a report from an independent consultant that says, yes, this would fit your needs. Okay, well, let's do it. I don't like it. I don't think it's a great location, but let's do it and move on to the next thing on our work plan, because the city has a huge work plan and they don't get a lot done. So we need to have functional government where we set aside politics and we just look at the issues independently and try to move forward on things. So that's where I stand. I don't want to defund the police, but I don't want to spend too much on the police either, because we have a lot of things to spend our money on. So that's my position on that one.
Thank you, Ron. Joe?
Yeah, thank you. Well, first off, Bill, does it sound all right? Right. Okay. Okay, I'll just plow ahead. First off, Bill, I will disagree when you said we're at square one. I think we're a lot farther along than what you said. We can move forward fairly quickly with this project. First, it does seem like there's broad agreement amongst us. I believe that we need a new police station. You know, this station currently is probably the worst of any police station in the state, if not beyond. So we definitely need a new police station. You know, the list of deficiencies is long. But when I came on council, part of my role was looking at various sites. And when we looked at Harrison, we were negotiating with the Franciscans. My sense was they were desperate to sell. And when we were voting on $8,975,000 to buy that property, I voted no because I felt we could have gotten a better deal. We want to save you money. We want to be good stewards of your money, and savings starts at acquisition. I voted no, not because I didn't like the Harrison site. Maybe it will work out, but I felt we could have gotten a better price. I don't have a number, but we could have driven a better bargain with the Franciscans. But hey, we bought it. It seems like my opponent and I are on the same page there. So moving forward, we have a duty to complete the work that 20 years, as I understand, we've been trying to get a police station. We have a duty to complete this project, and I have, as your council member, a responsibility to do it in a fiscally responsible and timely manner. My proposition is for us to look at 3 sites that the city owns, being the current police station, Harrison, and what's called the Suzuki property. These are properties the city owns. We don't need to buy any more land for this. Let's do an independent professional analysis of these 3 sites the city owns and determine which would be the best site for a police station in terms of cost and time. And then we make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Joe, you mentioned the Suzuki property. That's another question that seems to have been, that project's been around for quite some time, well over 10 years, the discussion of whether that property, city-owned property, should be developed for some level of affordable housing. But again, it seems to be back to square one. After 10 years or so of discussions, studies, plans, and the recommendations of several council-appointed citizens group for some level of affordable housing on that site. And I think expenditure over $100,000 so far on plans and studies. Nothing's happened. So again, the same question. Do you support moving forward with the development of some level of affordable housing on the site? And if so, what can the council do to move the project along? Or if you are against developing any level of affordable housing on the site, why are you opposed? And then what next? Rasham, we'll start with you.
Thank you. So the Suzuki property, I'm actually surprised to be talking about it here today because it hasn't come up for the council in a while. I think that the last time the council discussed it was 2019 at the turn of the last election. And the reason the project failed was not due to any council opposition. There was a majority council that supported it. It was because the project was not feasible the way that it was being proposed. We could not build 100 units there because our code would not allow it. Now, I oppose the project for a number of reasons. Foremost, it does not conform to our land use plan. Land use plan is our zoning plan. It drives development on the island. When we talk about preservation of the rural Bainbridge Island, we're talking about properties like Suzuki, which are in the rural zones, which are not slated for, per the community, high-density development and growth. Number 2 reason why I opposed it was because the city council prior to me made the fiscally unwise decision, in my opinion, to contract with a private developer for a public housing project. It's just completely unheard of. If you look out in the world of public housing projects, there was an 18% profit margin baked into that contract. And I'll correct you, Bill, the city has not spent $100,000 on Suzuki. It's $350,000 of an $800,000 contract that we've wasted. That's literally produced this many units of affordable housing. I don't think the city should look into developing Suzuki at all, because I think that's just putting more money after bad. I think we need to take a step back, support our organizations that know how to build affordable housing, support private developers to build affordable housing where our zoning map says it belongs, such as the Wintergreen project. And aside from that, I think the city needs to take a step back from Suzuki and perhaps consider donating it to parks for much needed outdoor space for our growing island and Winslow residents.
Thank you. Clarence?
I've heard, sounds like people are. Got it. Good now? Right. Thank you. Sounds like people are opposed to development on Suzuki, yet I've heard some folks say that that should be a place to be considered for a combined municipal court police station, so there seems to be some inconsistency about how to protect the environment. 90% of our island is wooded or open areas. Only 10% is built, so we have way ahead on our green coverage. I just have to go back to the police station and municipal court structure for a second. Here we are. This was going to be permitted. It was ready to be permitted, planned and moving forward. Then a new city manager came on board, and the mayor and other people on the council said, let's the city manager look at this for a while. It seems like a reasonable idea. He has. He's put together a report. And I encourage you, he's put together a video. $12,000 of your tax dollars put this video together. And it's available on my Facebook page, Clarence for Bainbridge. You can have a straight link there, and you'll see the mayor, the police chief, and the head of the municipal court, our judge, show the incredible inadequacies of the structure. It's not worthy of the 20th century, let alone the 21st century. And so please look at that video. And people have also suggested, let's do more studies. Study in itself is delay. Delay costs money. I'm totally against analysis paralysis for its sake, just to try to stop things and slow it down. And by the way, every time we wait, we still paid for that building, and we're still renting the municipal court. Every month costs us money. Every month is costing us, and we're not even moving forward to giving our officers and our court the kind of facility and the citizens expect.
Thank you. John, and again, the question is affordable housing and the Suzuki property.
Yes. I followed the public presentations and the discussion of the Suzuki project over a period of time. I was a member of the Planning Commission. But here's the point that I'll make more than once. I had a brief conversation with Morgan Smith when she was the associate city manager, deputy city manager, and I said, why did these questions never come to the Planning Commission? Why was this the council's baby? And they contracted with various people, and it cost a lot of money, but none of the questions of consistency with the comprehensive plan or feasibility, that sort of thing, nothing ever came to the Planning Commission. So we had no opportunity to intervene and say, well, let's examine these options and see what's best. It was an example of how the council gets into a huddle and then, eventually backs away because they don't know the answer to all the questions that they've raised. I'm not sure we would have fixed anything, but it would have been a more effective consideration of the options if the whole process had been done differently.
Kent?
Thanks. We have to be careful not to pay lip service to sustainable design and our attention to climate change. I mean, it's a classic, basic, fundamental urban design idea that you put housing and people near services and transit. I mean, Suzuki is not. I mean, it's kind of crazy to me that it even came up. Who cares if it's a city property? Does it make sense and contribute to the values that we have as a community? I don't think it even came close. I mean, who cares if we were going to take all the trees down? The fact is that it did not contribute to the things that we hold to be important if we believe that we have a responsibility for climate change. But there's more to it than that. I mean, roughly speaking, and hopefully these numbers aren't too far off, the affordable housing entry level was between 90 and 130% of AMI, the area median income, which for a family of 4 is $92,000. And this is a big deal because that means people making up to $130,000 have entry into it. And what's more is that the city, to create the affordable housing, was subsidizing each affordable unit by about $250,000. Well, what that means to me, and I don't know what it means to you, but I'm retired and I have a fixed income. This means that I am supporting somebody to buy an affordable house that's making more money than I am. I mean, it's just a nutty way to go. I think that what's important to consider are all of the options. There are other city properties. I mean, there's a bunch of city property in the Ferry District. There are also developer incentives. My background with affordable housing was both developer incentive based and also nonprofit based. So I agree with what's been said here that both developer incentives have to be used to create affordable housing at no cost to the residents. And also we have to hand this off to HRB. We can fund them, but we need them with their experience to actually make this work. Working with John Rose and his group, I agree completely. They were just out of their league. Thanks.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, thank you. Bill, in this case, I will agree we're at square one, so unfortunately with the Suzuki. But let's first ask, why are we doing this? Why were we pursuing an affordable housing project at Suzuki? Is because we are in an affordable housing crisis. I like that question to be directly asked of all of us. We are in an affordable housing crisis on Bainbridge. The Bainbridge Island School District is down 600 students, over 600 students since 2005. Talk to any business owner on this island and they're having a hard time finding workers. That is a fact. So we are, the viability of our community is dependent on getting housing for our workers, housing for our families. And Suzuki was an attempt to solve that problem. And it was so discouraging to see, I would say, colleagues and former colleagues who fought that. So frankly, with Suzuki, we couldn't get it to pencil out. The cost and the revenues that we would get out of that project, it couldn't pencil out, and so it stalled, and then COVID hit. But let's just say, why were we doing that project? Was to satisfy an absolute need that this community has. So moving forward, what do we do with Suzuki? The way I see it, we have 3 choices. We try again, another affordable housing project. I'm in favor of that. And by the way, this proposal was not going to clear cut the whole property. About 3/4 of the property was going to stay intact. So when you hear people about clear cutting Suzuki, that's just simply not correct. So we either we try again, find some new model, some new partner. 2, we sell it. The city is not a park district. We do not sit on property. We either do something with affordable housing or something with it, or we sell it. And what? We sell it to who? Someone who would develop it. They're not going to buy it and do nothing with that. Or 3, another option that I like is we go to parks and say, hey, maybe we make this a park. Let's do a land transfer for a property in Winslow. Thank you.
Suzuki. So Suzuki's been going on for a while. And I was right in the thick of this when I got on the council in 2016. I proposed an ecological study because everybody said we're going to do an ecologically sensitive development. Well, that ended up slowing down the whole thing, and it's still not developed. Now, here was talking about putting the police and court facility there. We're going around in circles because it's already been determined that it's not an appropriate place. It's not an appropriate place for a court and police facility because it's too close to the schools. So we're going to go through that again. We're going to come up with the same conclusion. It's not a good place for that. A lot of people think that I'm against affordable housing. I'm not. I just want it to be in the right place, and that is not in the right place. It's in the conservation area of the island. It's not appropriate to put that kind of urban high density, and my opponent voted for 100 units of housing at Suzuki. And the plan was to convert the pond into a stormwater facility. It doesn't seem very consistent with his concerns about climate change to cut down a bunch of trees, maybe not clearing the whole property, but cutting down a lot of trees. I propose that we put the Suzuki issue to bed and give it to the Parks Department or the Land Trust, and we focus on stuff that's not so divisive, because every time we talk about developing Suzuki, it's very divisive, and I think we can find a lot of affordable housing things that we'll agree on. I think the Wintergreen project is great. I was one of the activists who worked to prevent the Visconsi property from being developed. Now that it's developed, I think that affordable housing would be a good use there. It's ideally located near amenities, transit. There's lots of stores, there's schools nearby. It's ideally located. When it was proposed that the city council enter into a development agreement with the developer to help make that project happen, and that could have been a lot of things, like helping to improve the project. My opponent was opposed to that. He didn't want anything to do with the development agreement. So yes, I support affordable housing, but not in the wrong places.
Thank you. Brenda?
Yes, when I first got appointed, the first thing they told me was, don't say anything about Suzuki. It's like, no, don't ever talk about that, because this is what will split the island in half. And, you know, people come to fisticuffs. And so the first event that I went to happened to be an open door event that Joe Dietz put on, and it was all about affordable housing. And at that time, someone asked me, would you be the advocate for affordable housing? And being new and, you know, being me, I said, yeah, I'll do that. And so I continued to push affordable housing and the Wintergreen Project, and wondered about Suzuki, you know. I think that Bainbridge Island as a city, we need to stay out of the affordable housing business. We need to leave that to our partners who are good at doing that. It's HRB and anybody else that knows how to build affordable housing. They know how to work with HUD to get the proper things that's needed so that the right people can get in there who need it. And we need to, you know, just be a supporter of that and a partner. If we have land, if we have money, we can support them in that. We don't have to be the ones building this. And the one thing that really happened with Suzuki that I think people are losing sight of is that the neighbors who lived around it had all kinds of problems with it. And that's who we should be listening to. That's why we're here, is to listen to our constituents. And if they have a problem with something, if we can't make it work, then it's just not workable.
Thank you. Chris?
Thank you. The very first environmental song I ever heard was almost 30 years ago by a good gentleman at that time named Cat Stevens. He now has, oh, thank you. All right. Anyway, a gentleman named Cat Stevens, now has a different name. However, the name of this song was Where Will the Children Play? And I'm that kind of guy, especially on Bainbridge Island. And the Suzuki property strikes me as not being an all or none decision relative to affordable housing. However, I am very interested in making sure that affordable housing is established with appropriate densities near neighborhood centers, etc., where there are support facilities for the residents there. At the same time, and the lower transportation costs for the residents there, and at the same time, keep open spaces on Bainbridge and not clear-cut Bainbridge like some of the people used to think almost when I was moving here. So it's not an all or none decision in my view. And I think that there are lots of options available for affordable housing, relatively few options available for keeping a space for where the children of all ages get to play. And let's turn that into a park, a facility, or an open athletic field or something like that the schools can use. I yield back the rest of my time.
Thank you. Thank you. Transportation obviously is a big issue now before the council. The city's Sustainable Transportation Task Force has identified numerous motorized and non-motorized projects and programs, but all of them can't be done at once. So and this is 1 minute response. So what are your top 2 or 3 priorities for implementing the task force recommendations and why? And we'll start with Kent. 1 minute.
And non-motorized transportation is fundamental to the island, but there are some truths to it too, and that's that how many of you, if you want to show a raise of hands, will bike into Winslow at least once a week? Polly, of course, but not many. I mean, I think we have to be sober about what non-transportation, sustainable non-transportation means. And, it certainly does mean providing alternative transit means other than walking and cycling. I mean, we live in a pretty remote community. For me, the most fundamental thing that we can do now is to improve the safety of those who are out every day now. I mean, it just creams me to see a mother or a father with a stroller on a road with no shoulders. I mean, we have to fix all the missing links on the existing shoulders that we have now. I mean, we're thinking big. People have said we want to have an exceptional plan. All we have is some fundamental needs that we need to fix. And I think the Sustainable Transportation Plan is a little bit out of league with what the island needs now. And we've spent over $360,000 so far on a plan that I think islanders haven't had an adequate voice, those who are participants in actual non-motorized use now.
Thank you. John?
Yes. I've been looking at the long list of items in the Sustainable Transportation Plan, and there are many, and over time, they're all good. I also have looked at the planning that has come from Squeaky Wheels and the long history of planning for the core 40 and emphasizing the need for improving shoulders and making them more available, safer for bikers. I think the different constituents all ought to get something out of the funding the next time around. And there are different constituents for the various forms of non-motorized travel, including walking. And that needs to be a part of planning that isn't always compatible with biking.
Okay, thank you. Ron, why don't we go to you? I'm trying to go back and forth, and I don't know.
It's okay.
What?
So the Sustainable Transportation Plan is sustainable in name only. There's no metrics in the plan so far to determine is it sustainable. It's supposedly part of the Climate Action Plan, but I'm just not sold on it. I think it's a waste of money. We have some very obvious needs that we should be tending to. That $300,000 that we spent for this consultant should have been spent on doing paved bike lanes. I've been driving up to Blakely Heights to work, carpentry, and the Blakely Avenue has no bike lanes. It's near a school. It would be a really easy road to put paved bike lanes on, and it's part of the core 40. We just need to get down. This is Sustainable Transportation Plan is a perfect example of pie in the sky. We've been working on it for 2 years, where there's all this process that looks like we're really doing something, and we're not. We just need to start building some bike lanes, and if there's paths that are easy to build, get on with it. It's just pie in the sky, wasting time when there's stuff we need to do.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, good. I knew I was next. So yes, one thing as a candidate with others, I've done a lot of canvassing, and one of the questions I consistently, or statements I get from constituents is bike. I really like the bike trail that was just put in, or wouldn't it be nice if I could ride my bike to Winslow with my kids? So I hear that loud and clear. So we need to focus on interconnecting our bike trails, our walking paths on the island. This is part of our viability of the community. It's part of our, frankly, our climate goals. So there's some, 30 seconds. There's some pinch points that we can readily address for safety for bike riders. I can't remember if Kent mentioned this, but certain what we call pinch points, say Buckland Hill Road, head of the Bay area, that needs to be improved. I'd love to see some more work on my end of the island. So I'll just say, constituents like bike trails. I like them. Let's do them. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
To me, a lot of the work is done on how to lay out the sustainable transportation. The key routes for sidewalks, trails, bike facilities, things like that have already been mapped out. And how they map to the stops for the for the transit organizations and everything else, how that works out as well. So there are key gaps, however, and their gaps are the network is disconnected between certain modes of transportation. 305 is a significant barrier, and we have limited sidewalks. There are some things that we can do. Create an intra-island circular shuttle routes, widen the sidewalk path on High School Road Northeast, establish an island-wide wayfinding program that you can use in your smartphone to figure out how to get from here to there, develop an all ages and all abilities bike connection on Day Road Northeast, and install traffic calming on Linwood. I love that traffic calming, I like that phrase. And the Center Road Northeast, and build a Grand Forest East Trail connection. Those things we can do. That's done. That's what we can do it now. Let's get started.
Brenda?
Yeah, I have to disagree with what was said. As a member of the Sustainable Task Force, we started this back in January, and there was a lot of work done, and I agree with Joe, we could use a lot on our end, on the north end. So what we're trying to do is improve safety. It's not just about bikes, it's about trails, it's all kind of mobility. And it's about hubs. It's places when you're riding your bike, where are you gonna go and charge up? Because I have an electric bike. So it's safety for kids, and it's when you're riding down Madison and you see, I saw 3 ladies with walkers trying to walk down Madison, and it was just, I felt bad for them because of the cutouts, you know. So the connectivity in that last mile, you know, just before this forum, Joe was talking about the Pingo app and how, you know, we can get places, but we may not be able to connect to other places. So I want to be able to ride my bike to Winslow too, but I don't want to ride down 305. I want to take a back road to where I'm safe. So.
Clarence?
I'm really enjoying this conversation because I agree with practically everybody on this panel. The Sustainable Transportation Plan is an aspirational document. It's a dream about what we could do if we had unlimited funds, but as you see, we don't have them. I'm a pragmatic optimist. I like to dream big, like the Japanese American Exclusion Memorial, and we started that 20 years ago. We had a shoebox and $1,200, and people thought it was crazy. But it happened. So we can still do things incrementally. And by the way, I'm really envious of you, Brenda, because I'd like to have an electric bike. That would be very cool. But let's keep that in mind. Brenda, you could do the back roads, but in our core areas, especially like Winslow that's happening, and this council was just approved a major improvement from Madison up to the library. That's a start. And for a lot of people who aren't as mobile as I am, I've done several Seattle to Portlands and Chili Hillies, but electric bikes and electric scooters, and I don't know what to call those single wheel things, those things will actually give people access and allow them more mobility because of our technology. So you don't have to be a fit guy like me to do it.
Thank you. Roshan?
Yeah, this is a difficult question because I initially supported the sustainable transportation planning efforts and process, and I'll remind members of the public, for those of you that recall, it came off the heels of a failed levy that the council tried to pass. It was a safe mobility levy where we asked the public for $15 million for transportation. Unfortunately, the council wasn't specific enough, and the voters rejected the city's request for funding for sustainable transportation or non-motorized transportation. I became concerned about the Sustainable Transportation Plan when it came back for another budget amendment for more money from the council. Meanwhile, I'm hearing from residents that basic safety issues and hazards are going unresolved. So here we are, and I think this also is indicative of and suggestive of the council's fallacy in thinking. We're planning for a future while ignoring basic needs, real needs that are everyday needs of islanders. So I would like to see a balance of both. I'd like to see limited funding on the Sustainable Transportation Plan. $350,000 is too much in my opinion. Invest in filling in the missing gaps, invest in infrastructure today so that we can start to make safety improvements to our roads now instead of in 10, 20 years.
Thank you. Another group, the Climate Change Advisory Committee, has made over 180 recommendations. Obviously, all can't be undertaken at once or even in the near future. So what are your top two or three priorities for implementing the advisory committee's recommendations, and why? Brenda, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so.
1 minute, 1 minute for this, do a quick one, it'll be a 1 minute, but you have a few more seconds now. Okay.
Well, I support climate change. That's my answer. And yeah, what I've seen as far as their recommendations, one of the things that I've been working with them on at first as part of the Race Equity Task Force and then as a member of City Council is their equity lens that they're putting in their climate change tool. And this will help to look at projects that will come to the City Council so that we can find out whether or not these projects not only have a climate change lens, but that they're equitable for everybody.
Okay. Chris?
There's a couple of things that we can do relative to climate change. And first of all, make no mistake, it is an imperative. It has to be done now. It has to be done now. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions will make great strides by reducing the need for carbon-based travel. And one of the things that I've bringing forward is high-speed communications. Fiber and 5G will get us off the roads and online, to where now that remote work is becoming more and more of a norm, we can be doing that. Multimodal transportation by reduced gas emissions for non-motorized travel, affordable housing being located near neighborhood centers, etc. All these kinds of things can be done to make to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions more than just aspirationally, but in a real sense. Does it make sense for little old Bainbridge Island to do something like this? Yes, the tip of the spear is the smallest point. We need to take the lead, and that's what we do on Bainbridge.
Okay. Rasham?
Yeah, so I think this is a really good question, and it relates back to funding and how the city has allocated its funding, also how our city spends its time. I think we've done well in the past 4 years to tackle a lot of the land use changes to our code, or the changes to our code to address some of the overdevelopment issues and the clear cuts, preservation of groundwater, things of that nature that are really going to secure the conservation areas and rural nature of the island into the future, preserve our tree canopy. I think we've gone a little too far, and I think that we continue to look at property owners and regulations as the focus of our climate efforts, while we're ignoring the biggest point source, pollution, and contribution to climate change. Sewer, for example. The council had an option recently to spend some of its ARPA funding, federal funding, to implementing tertiary treatment on our sewer plant. Council unfortunately declined to do that. I fully support that because we need to start tackling the biggest point source, pollution, if we're really going to clean up our environment, clean up the health of our sound, stormwater infrastructure so that we can make sure that we have adequate groundwater well into the future. Those are the things that I would like to see the city focus on from here on out.
Clarence?
I really like the Climate Action Plan. It's, again, another aspirational document. The thing we just talked about, the alternative transportations. If you can get people off of their cars and riding bikes and walking, you've already made an impact on that. Most people don't know that the biggest thing, we can do all the things in the Climate Action Plan, but there's one big bear in the room, and that's Puget Power. Puget Power is responsible for 1/3 of our toxic carbon load. Now, they don't see it here, but they have those coal plants. And it really frustrates me because I walk everywhere. I'm a vegetarian. I haven't had any meat in 40 years, and I have a small footprint for carbon, drive an electric car, and yet when I charge up my car, I'm adding to the load. So until we get that done, all the things we talk about in the Climate Action Plan are for naught because of Puget Power still serving our community. That's out of our control, but let's hope. One of the questionnaires asked about what's your dream, and I said Puget Power actually being real green, like City Light or any of the other local utilities.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, 2 or 3 things related to or consistent with the Climate Action Plan. I don't have a lot in focus, but the biggest rationale, a large part of the rationale for the Sustainable Transportation Plan is that we need to get people out of cars as quickly as possible, as much as possible, as quickly as possible, and provide for alternative modes of transportation, less emphasis and so on. The other thing is planning for inevitable sea level rise. That's an important component of our shoreline planning. That's it's important that we identify what needs to be done in that area.
Thank you. Kent?
Thanks. I'm not naive, and I hope you're not either. I mean, each American is responsible for 20 tons of CO2 annually, although the Climate Action Plan says 9 tons. A majority of that savings in the Climate Action Plan comes from PSE by state mandate, reducing and eliminating carbon-based energy. What can we do on island? Well, I think there's some really important things to keep in mind. One is that we have to create awareness, because our consumption does not come from driving cars. It comes from how much money we spend. I mean, every time we spend $1, we have a carbon footprint. And I think cars are a naive way to do it. And if you look at the Climate Action Plan and talk to those folks, less driving is not going to make a difference. I believe awareness, and this is what the Climate Action Plan should focus on, is the number one thing. The number two thing is we have to be sure we don't compromise island businesses by burdens that don't have any reasonable effect. And you know, you have to use a cotton bag 20,000 times to equal a plastic bag. I mean, it's just ridiculous, some of the things that we burden our businesses with, and the same thing is true even for the single-use utensils and stuff. We have to be rational, we have to reduce our consumption, and we have to create awareness.
Thank you. Joe?
I love this question. I've devoted much of my life to addressing climate change. I was council liaison to the Climate Change Advisory Committee. See, that plan was the Climate Action Plan was approved almost a year ago, and now comes the implementation part, which is, to me, why I'm on council in large measure. There's so many things to do. One, Clarence, you mentioned we need to negotiate Puget Sound Energy. The franchise agreement is coming up. We need to negotiate an agreement with them that works for us. We need to increase our bike trails to get people out of cars so they can not emit carbon emissions. But very quickly, in the time that I have, I'll say, what am I doing right now on the implementation of the Climate Action Plan? Because this is why I'm here. This is why I'm really excited, is we're working on an ordinance as we speak to reduce plastic pollution in our food service industry. That's one. Expect an ordinance to be delivered soon. Two, I'm working hard on getting a biodigester on the island. Time's up. Okay. And some other things.
Ron?
All right, we'll see what happens with all that stuff, Joe. Maybe you'll follow through this time. So I want to talk a little bit about Vision 2050. It's a regional plan that Puget Sound Regional Council came up with for the region. And one of the strategies for reducing greenhouse gas emissions is to have transit-oriented development. On Bainbridge Island, a lot of our development's happening in the conservation area of the island. We can use the transfer of development rights to move more of that development into Winslow, where it belongs, near transit. We need to, in terms of adaptation, we need to start promoting better forest management practices, because with the droughts, we're seeing our forests dry out, and we're seeing a lot of fuel building up, and we're going to have some forest fires if we're not careful. We need to have more non-motorized facilities to get people out on their e-bikes. If you notice, there's a lot of people riding e-bikes now. There'll be even more if we just quit messing around as pie-in-the-sky plans and get some paved shoulders on our roads. We'll get more people out on their e-bikes.
Thank you. Now, this is the senior center, so obviously there's a question about this city-owned facility. By the way, the center's membership has really more than doubled in just a few short years, from 700 members to well over 1,500 right now. Given the facility's existing capacity, it's becoming more and more of a challenging to meet the growing demand for more programs and services. While a jointly funded effort to make needed accessibility and safety improvements is now underway, the capacity challenges remain a serious concern. So maybe some creative thinking and some ideas. What would you recommend the city do to address the challenges being faced by the center to meet these growing program and service demands? We'll start with John.
Wow. I guess I'll draw a blank almost.
We'll do 1 minute on this,
Yeah.
because, sorry, 1 minute.
I'm a senior, and the growing demographic, the growing portion of our population, the only growing portion of our population is over 65. So the senior center is essential, and the place has been renovated, and there's plan for more renovation, as I understand it. The Coates Design is contracted for planning. More power to it. I think I have not been so much of a customer here as I've been a user of the facilities for events like this. So I don't know. That's the best I can do right now.
Okay. This is not a trick question. We just need some ideas of what we can do. Kent?
My mom lives over at Winslow Manor, and this has to do with seniors. I'm not a senior until December, so I'll get in the discount. Big problem for her and all vulnerable populations is just accessibility. I mean, programs are one thing, facilities are another, but I want to speak to just accessibility to facilities in town for vulnerable populations, which are largely senior. And it's one thing that we have to focus on with the Sustainable Transportation Plan is not just missing links, but we also have to look very carefully at the demographic that lives in Winslow and that they can get to the boat or to shopping or to the library for that matter. And I'm glad that the city is going to make the improvements up Madison, it looks like. Affordable housing is another thing. I'm avoiding the programming thing because I'm not sure what city properties are available and what funding is available. Certainly if there is demand, then that has to be brought before council to look at. But the issue is what are properties, what's program needs. We need to link that with affordable housing and accessible transportation for vulnerable populations.
Joe, why don't we go to you?
Well, very quick, 1 minute, right? Okay.
Yeah,
This is a great
just some ideas.
Yeah, well, this is a great place. This is such a vibrant center for the community. But let me just say, it needs some upgrades. I would love to see it build up with some affordable housing for seniors here. I mean, this is such a central core part of Winslow. So let's also your store is way too crowded and too small. I mean, I'm sure you guys, you know more than me. You probably need some bigger space for your classes because so much happens here. So I'll just say the city, we need to be a good partner with you because this is a vibrant part of our community. Also, getting back to my last question that I didn't have a chance to fully answer, we're going to have funding for, this is one of our emergency hubs should something happen. And I want to beef up the solar energy system. We got funding for a storage to add to this site. So time's up. Okay.
Whoa, a minute goes fast. So I don't think it's controversial helping to renovate and upgrade the senior center facility here. I'm not real familiar with your operations, but I think that any of us up here would support funding. I don't have any specific ideas. In my 1 minute, though, I'll share with you an idea. I was out doorbelling this summer, and I noticed there's a lot of older people living in bigger houses that are bigger than they need. And I had a nice conversation with somebody about that. We need to get a little committee together to work on how do we come up with a program for converting single-family houses into multifamily units for seniors with little units so that somebody can live there, they can pay a monthly amount, kind of like a mini condominium, but maybe not a condominium, so that seniors will have an alternative to living in a big house that was fine to them when they were 40, 50 years old, but now they can't take care of it. And they don't want it, they don't have an alternative. So that to me is a nut to crack. That needs some innovation, and that's something I'd like to work on.
Okay. Brenda?
Yes, that's something that Agent Solo and Bankers talked to us about. How do we do that? How do we keep people in their houses and co-locate them? But I think that, I am a member and I have done yoga and have been knitting here. And I think that expanding the building would be a good idea. There are a lot of senior citizens here, and we need to have space for that.
Okay. Chris?
Over 25% of the population of Bainbridge Island is 60 years old or older. And so there's clearly a need, and that number, by the way, is growing. So without question, there's a need for revising senior support across the board, in addition to the senior center. So I think what we ought to do is review the requirements. What do we need a senior center to do? And once we do that, it's real straightforward. There's no magic bullet here. We need to rebuild. It's just that simple. It's that straightforward. Thank you.
Okay. Rochelle?
Yeah, so I'm going to tie in the importance of the budget again here, keeping in mind that fiscal responsibility of a council member is our highest obligation as elected officials. Now, I believe that a city's budget should reflect a city's values. One of the most beloved organizations on this island is the Senior Center. If you look at our budget right now, you wouldn't know that, because the Senior Center every year competes along with other organizations for that $330,000 of annual funding. I also remember how difficult it was to get the funding necessary to afford the repairs that are currently underway by Coates Architects. I heavily advocated for that and supported that against the former city manager's recommendation that we not spend our money that way. I hope that with the new city management at City Hall that we have a better partner. The Senior Center has a better partner with the city. I hope that any funding request that the Senior Center makes of the city that relates to the expansion of the Senior Center, activities, programs, building, even the idea of developing affordable housing at the Senior Center is met with overwhelming receptivity and support by your council members and this administration at City Hall.
Thank you. And Clarence?
Kent, you don't have to wait till December. The minimum age is 50, so you can join right now. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I've been a member. I'm actually in that growing 25%, 65 and over demographic, and we got a plan for this because our population age is 10 years on average higher than the rest of the county. So we already have an aging population, and I'm back to affordable housing. We really got to get the demographic mix on younger families because Joe was right. 600,000 students have left. 300 are in the graduating class, but only 200 are in the kindergarten class. So we've got to look at that in the spectrum, but I'm focusing on the senior end, and I'm a full supporter of the Senior Center. It's strategically located. The mayor's right, as a beloved institution, and the city should move forward and do everything it can to be a partner to make this a better place.
Thanks. Another question from the audience. Do you approve of the city council giving 1/2 of the $7 million grants from the federal government to affordable housing? And Ron, you're on my list first.
Yes, I do support that, and I would like to see some, maybe a possibility of the city partnering with the Wintergreen developer to make that project even better. I think it could be fewer overall units, maybe more affordable units. There are some recommendations from the Design Review Board that can be incorporated into the project, but I fully support that. I would note, though, that the $2 million that's being donated to 550 Madison is only for 13 affordable units. So it does cost a lot of money to create affordable housing, and that's why when I look at the Wintergreen project with its 31 affordable units, I really would like to see the city council get involved and say, look, how can we help make sure your project happens without circumventing our land use review process, because the city council can't actually do that, but how can we make your project better and make sure it happens? And maybe take, I know that $2 million was for 550 Madison, 1.7 I believe was for a contingency. So I'd like to see that spent on something soon.
Thank you. Joe, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So the question is, was we in favor of that allocation? Well, yes, I was. I was on council and I voted for it, so I would say most definitely. That was $3 3/4 million for affordable housing, as Ron said, part of that was going to go to the 550 Madison project, the balance going to other projects to be determined. So let's just say this is money well spent. This will free up. I was talking to Fader Elliott at Housing Resources Bainbridge. This will save them 2 years of time to get affordable housing. My gosh, so we saved 2 years. This is going to literally keep families on the island and people looking for work who needed to live here. So I fully support that, and I guess that answered the question.
Okay, thanks. Chris?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes, I support it. Not only do I support it, but I made the proposal in order to have it passed.
Thank you. Clarence?
Yes, and I applaud the council members who voted for this. It was the right move to do. And keep in mind that this money is leverage money. As Joe mentioned, it's being a partner with the Housing Resources Bainbridge. And so we can do this money. And then the 1.75, if I'm correct, is to be targeted for truly low income, not a percentage of, but really low income. And I'm really in favor of that because we have that loss. Ken has mentioned about the percentage of AMI. You know, that's that's affordable housing, but it's not low income housing. And that's part of our community that we ignore so much. So I'm really in favor of using that, dedicating that 1.75 million to hopefully jumpstart real housing for low income people in our community.
Thank you. Sham?
Yeah, so that was a recent vote by the City Council, because it's still very fresh in my mind. The City Council did vote to award about half of the funds to affordable housing. I voted to support $2 million of that funding, not the full 3.75 to affordable housing. And my reasons were twofold. One, there were a lot of other urgent and pressing needs that we could have allocated that funding towards. For example, I supported that remainder chunk, that 1.75, to just go to Health and Human Services in general. That way it could be divided up amongst all the Health and Human Services organizations and not just one that provide vital and valuable services to our community, such as the Senior Center, such as Helpline House, which runs a home subsidy repair program, which runs a apartment rental assistance program, the Teen Mental Health Center, and so forth. I also supported allocating some of that funding towards our sewage treatment plant, which is in a really dire situation. I requested a pause from the council until we got information to make sure that if we didn't put funding towards fixing that sewage plant, it wouldn't then need to be fixed on the back of taxpayers.
Thank you. Kent?
Yes, I support the funding, but I think there's some important things to keep in mind. One is Rotary last summer supported 500 insecure food children on the island last year. I mean, it just underscores the issues that we have with insecurity, and it's not just housing. I mean, there's this intersectionality of all issues that go with housing. I think there's some things that we have to keep in mind. One is, if more money goes to affordable housing, how and where does it go? They're starting a housing action plan, which will evaluate current housing and housing needs on the island. There's also the Winslow Area Master Plan, which is coming up. So where the money goes is fundamental. But I think what we have to keep in mind is there has been discussion about putting affordable housing in Island Center. Boy, I'm certainly against that. It has to, again, to do with sustainability. You know, you're not putting people where services and transit are. And there's also a move afoot to make Linwood Center a location for affordable housing. Well, it sounds great, but again, I mean, I don't know who lives on the south end, but the neighborhood center is supposed to be for the neighbors, and it's an island, an off-island destination. I think we have to be very sober about where affordable housing goes, not only what it is.
Thank you. This is a question about development and livable neighborhoods.
John?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
John.
Yeah,
Sorry.
just to say a little bit about the question. I lobbied the council on behalf of HRB's request, and I'm very glad that the request was fully funded, because there are two projects, the Wyatt and Madison project that is underway, that the HRB had an obligation to meet, and the city has made it easy for them and for a change, because in the past they haven't had as much as HRB has needed. So I'm for that, and I guess it's a good place to stop. I do want to say that the council is not done with affordable housing, having allocated a bundle of federal funds to this good cause. There's a whole lot more that has to be done, and it's going to take public funding and a lot of work on the part of council members and staff to get really moving on affordable housing policies.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that, John. Again, I said the next question has to do with development and livable neighborhoods. The comprehensive plan, the housing element of the comprehensive plan, one of the policies states that the city should support the development of livable neighborhoods. It's a national movement to rethink how we design and develop neighborhoods, to not just focus on the size of a development or the density of a development, but instead to focus on the livability of a neighborhood, developments that are pedestrian-oriented, with public spaces for socializing, and designs that are environmentally sustainable. And this is a 1-minute response. Do you believe that the city should undertake efforts to begin implementing a livable neighborhoods program? If so, why? And if not, why not? Clarence, we're going to start with you.
This is something that we were talking a lot about studies. There's one that was put together by a bunch of citizens called the Affordable Housing Task Force. I think it was 2017. And they took a very hard look at all of the things in the toolkit that our community could do. And I would say I would like to have that as the platform document, if not put into action on the city council should you elect me on that council. And that's one of the elements that they mention. I lived in Portland, Oregon, and they were urban villages. All these neighborhoods had all the services you could possibly have within like a 10-block radius. Food, clothing, groceries, restaurants, dry cleaning, whatever, because they had it already planned in that community. And that's a macro urban area, but it certainly can be done here. And we do have those regional centers. And it takes a while. Make sure we have the infrastructure in place, however. You may need sewers, you may need other things to support, perhaps, let's say, a restaurant, but the concept is right because you need people in a community to walk to places. Linwood Center that Kent mentioned is actually becoming one of those areas.
Thank you. Rasham?
Yes, so I had the pleasure of supporting a lot of the land use code changes that were implemented on the heels or during the moratorium work plan. The moratorium was adopted by council in 2018. A lot of the reason for that was to prevent some of the type development that we see out there that is just so big. We call them McMansion development. The homes don't face each other. The sidewalks go nowhere. It just doesn't make sense. It's completely context insensitive. I think some of the livable neighborhoods concepts were imported into our land use code changes during the moratorium work plan. I think when we think about livable neighborhoods and development on this island moving forward, we have to be also sensitive to transit-oriented development. They should overlay, which means contrary to what I heard my opponent say, I would not support extension of sewer or utilities out into the conservation areas to increase density in areas of the island where it doesn't make sense, where we're just gonna get an increase in emissions because people are gonna be driving to and from Winslow or the ferry to get to work. Transit-oriented development, livable neighborhoods, that makes sense. Let's keep our carbon footprint and our climate goals forefront when we are making our land use decisions as well.
Thank you. Kent?
Nothing that's happened is not allowed by zoning or land use. I mean, we got a problem with how development occurs. It's not whether or not we like it or not, it's what we're allowing. And I think the idea of livability for me has to do with maintaining rural character. And this is a very difficult thing for us to address and discuss. I don't think any of us want to challenge property rights, the ability to put a house of whatever kind you want on your property or to build what's now allowed as an ADU. But nonetheless, the bottom line for all this is we're putting more cars on the road as undeveloped parcels continue to be developed. I mean, what's to be done about it? I mean, I think Clarence, while it's a nice idea about Portland, shoot, the density is so high and our density is so low. It's not an analogous situation. I mean, one thing simple for livability is to enforce the speed limits. When 20% of people are going 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, I mean, that's a big problem in my neighborhood. I mean, Old Mill is a nightmare because it's fun to drive on and people zip along, or those who are going to the boat. And I think we have to be attentive to the kind of development that happens in Linwood. It is a big development that is not neighborhood centered, and I don't think I want that, or you do, in the other neighborhood centers.
John?
Yeah. Livable neighborhoods, there's a concept that was used back in 2006, 2007, I was part of a work group that developed it was an initiative taken by Mayor Cordenoy, and it didn't float well with the council, but a lot of the ideas that we worked up in the 2025 Growth Advisory Committee had a lot to do with making neighborhoods more better organized, more together. And having an overlay that identifies watersheds and making people more conscious of the watershed surrounding their own property, that's an element of livability that's very compatible with our enjoyment of our natural environment. And it does work. And the more young people coming to the island, the more cohesion we will have. I've seen that happen right around me on Sullivan Road.
Thank you. Ron, what do we do?
So this is the trick question, right, Bill?
Sorry?
This was the trick question, right?
No.
You had one for us. You know, I have a feeling that livable neighborhoods is kind of a technical term that somebody, for some kind of particular, something specific, but I think of it in terms of quality of life. And we're not going to be building a whole lot of new neighborhoods, we're going to be building some. And one of the ways, there's a variety of ways to approach this. One is through our design guidelines and our standards for development. And those do try to address livability. Another thing is traffic concurrency. Congestion, it definitely impacts our livability. And a lack of non-motorized facilities impacts our livability. Also, we saw last summer we had a heat dome that came in. We did a lot better than urban areas because we have a lot of trees, and those help to eliminate heat islands that occur when you don't have enough trees. So just preserving our natural landscape also helps with livability.
Thank you. Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Well, we're already doing some of that work. We did the new subdivision ordinance, what was it, last year, where it's more cluster development, more open space. So we are making progress in that. But let's just say, as far as land use, I believe we need to adapt to a changing climate, but we need to also maintain the viability of our community, which is specifically relating to the bike trails and walkability in our communities, something, again, I heard over and over with constituents doing canvassing. So I would really want us to focus on, again, the Sustainable Transportation Plan. Let's implement that, the recommendations of that, and let's secure funding for that. Let's encourage energy efficiency, renewable energy. Let's keep the density, what growth we have in Winslow, where the transportation, the schools, and the businesses are, and keep the rural areas rural, green, and a carbon sink. Thank you.
Okay. Chris?
Well, this is really about a design of a subdivision, to use that bad word. And the design points can be done very well as long as we do the right kind of materials that blend in with the character of the surroundings, as long as we avoid, as much as possible, cutting down trees, as long as we make things walkable, bikeable, and supportable for automobiles. These design questions have been around for a long time and been answered very well. I think if we do some of the initiatives that have been discussed here this evening, these kinds of things will happen almost by fiat.
Thank you. It's 10 after 6. Maybe now's a good time to allow each of you.
Can I get to talk about livable? Can I get to talk about livable neighborhoods?
Brenda, I'm sorry. I look at the clock and
I can speak to that.
right. Sorry about that.
It's okay. I get an extra minute because. Yeah, when I think about livable neighborhoods, I think about accessibility and being able to walk from my house to a park, to a trail, to a grocery store, to a restaurant. That to me is livability. I shouldn't have to catch the bus to get down to Winslow. I keep bringing that up because we have nothing on the north end. And I think it's all in the planning. When you're planning, we already have these neighborhoods, so when we're talking about adding on to them, we should be thinking about managing not just the livability, but the growth of it all.
Okay. And again, I apologize for that. But again, we wanted to end this at 6:30, so I have two more questions. But maybe now's a good time to allow each of you to ask your opponent a question. 1 minute to ask and 2 minutes to respond. And we'll start with Ken, the question to John.
Oh, boy. Yes, sure. Okay, so I said that I have 40 years of professional experience listening, working with residents in multiple communities and settings, developers, governments, and agencies. I mean, these are real-world applied problems where I have worked to find solutions and where I have had many successes. And in my 33 years, besides managing a bunch of farm animals, I've worked on various task forces, the Design Review Board, Open Space Commission, Public Arts Commission, and a number of nonprofits. John, I have a question for you. While you grew up on the island, you were away for 40 years. And what real-world problems relevant to the council tasks have you accomplished, and what can you offer? And I would say that Island Center, your support of that was not a success. And I would say rezoning for affordable housing is also a non-starter. How do you address those?
Rezoning for affordable housing? My main interest in changing the guidelines or rules for affordable housing have to do with the Winslow area. It wasn't going to go, the idea wasn't going to go very far in Island Center planning. I didn't push it. I was a liaison person there, sometimes intervening, sometimes asking questions, but not making anything happen. Where we need to concentrate our attention is on fixing the area in Winslow that is governed by floor area ratio standards. It's not working well. It hasn't worked well for years. We're way behind where we should be in terms of planning for housing within Winslow in mixed use and in multifamily development or redevelopment of areas. People try to tag me with upzoning as an idea, as something necessary. That's not my way of thinking at all. Let's see, were there other things you wanted? It was real world stuff. Yeah.
John, if you want to ask, Kent the question.
Yeah. Scott, if you had, Scott, if you had an obligation to lead a study of the municipal code and find the places that need fixing, where would you go first and what would you do?
Well, John, you and I had a conversation about this some months ago. And I actually asked John if you'd be willing to lead the change in updating the land use code based on the vision of the comp plan. And he said, well, that's really interesting. It'd be a good thing. John's an English professor, and getting the words right and what they mean is really important. What was the question?
Well, the question is, where would you start?
Where would I start? Well, shoot. I guess all of you may have heard, but the planning director just resigned. And there's been lots of issues within the city staff. And boy, oh boy, do I hear this from neighbors and other constituents about just permit process and just how to translate stuff. And clearly it is not council's role is policy. Taking the vision of the comp plan to create a rural environment, to make neighborhood centers for the neighbors who live there, and then bringing is the staff's job. And bringing that to council to review is the council's job to review and approve. So no, what's my role? No. No. But my job is to oversee the staff and to make sure that things work out. But thanks for the question.
Thank you. How about Joe and Ron? Joe, you want to ask?
I asked first? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Ron, here you are. We were colleagues on council for 2 years, and we did a lot of good work. But one thing I found is the lack of support you gave to families. And I hate to bring this up, but you even had a do not reproduce motion, which was not particularly supportive of families. So my question to you is, with your work, what you're saying on your campaign trail and what you've done on council, what can you say definitively that will help families?
Well, first of all, I Don't Reproduce Day was not anti-family. It was meant to have a day to honor people. And there's a lot of people that I know who haven't had children. And they don't have a day, as what's his name, Bill Maher says. They don't have a day, all they have is happy hour. And so, I mean, it's supposed to be funny, but what do I do for families? I'm concerned about quality of life, and that affects all families. To say that that's anti-family and what have I done for families, I know a lot of families, and a lot of the things that I'm concerned about aren't things that I need to be exceptionally concerned about during my lifetime, but during their lifetime. So for me, the ultimate civil right is the right of future generations to inherit an intact ecosystem, a planet that's not burning up, a planet where we don't have hundreds of species going extinct, and where we respect the rights of nature as a way of respecting the rights of future generations. So for me, intergenerational equity and justice is really important. That's what I'm about. I'm about the future after I'm gone. And if that's not good for families, I don't know what is.
Thank you. And Ron, do you want to ask Joe a question?
All right. So when I got into council, one of my missions was to figure out a way to prevent clear cuts. And I had 2 council colleagues who joined me in that, and we were on the ad hoc tree committee with a couple of planning commission members, including John, down the table here. And we wanted to figure out a way to prevent large clear cuts. So we had developers routinely scalping residential lots from lot line to lot line, and we wanted to find a solution. So we worked for a year and a half to figure out how to use low impact development, which was being mandated by the state, in critical areas. And we were doing our periodic review of the critical area ordinance. And what we came up with is called the Aquifer Recharge Protection Area Requirement, that requires developers to retain up to 65% of a lot in native vegetation. It's a landmark regulation. It was part of the Critical Areas Ordinance 2018, and my opponent voted against it. Can you hear? You couldn't hear me? Did I get another 2 minutes? Okay, yeah. The question is, Joe, you voted against the Critical Areas Ordinance after campaigning as an environmentalist in 2017. I don't know why you voted against it. It was important environmental legislation, and I'd like to know why you voted against it. That's my question.
Wow, that's a great question. I remember that. Okay, hold this up. Thank you. If I learn anything tonight, it's to hold the mic up. So that is a great question. The Critical Areas Ordinance, that was what, that came to a vote in April of 18, thereabouts, around the first quarter when I came on. March? Okay. At the time when this was happening, this was a fairly, I'll just say, an innovative ordinance. And I remember this well. When this was coming up to a vote, there was a lot of concern of people coming to the dais in public comment. The school superintendent said, I am concerned about this ordinance. Members of the board of the Bainbridge Island School District said, I'm concerned about this ordinance. Friends of the farm came up and said, I'm concerned about this ordinance. Constituent after constituent after constituent said, I'm concerned about this ordinance. And what did I say? I said, we are not ready to vote. We are not ready to vote when there's so many questions here. I didn't say I was against it. I said we need to still talk about it and we need to listen to our constituents in our community for such a an ordinance that had such an impact on people, I said, we are not ready to vote on this. And it went to a vote, and I voted no. So it wasn't like I was for any frickin' clear cuts, for crying out loud. I was listening to our constituents. So, let's get real. I am for, to label someone environmentalist and in parentheses is really kind of a sham, really. So, look, I've devoted my life to climate change, and so help me, I will work with you in my second term to implement the climate action plan. I'm already started to do that. I have background in clean energy development. I can work with people thank you. Okay.
Okay. Brenda and Chris. Brenda, you want to start?
Okay. So guiding principle number 3 of the comprehensive plan commits to fostering diversity. The City Council has begun a path to making this so by creating the Race Equity Advisory Committee, making them a permanent committee, and becoming a member of the Government Alliance on Race Equity. There is more to do. The city has not fully tapped into the experience and wisdom of this committee's ability to advise on race equity policy issues. So what are you willing to do to help empower the Race Equity Advisory Committee?
Thank you for that question, Brenda. First, I am all about race equity. It's a little known fact, or actually maybe not so much, that I grew up in an Air Force family and we spent a great deal of time outside the United States, and primarily in Hawaii. And I experienced, certainly not perhaps to your extent, but I experienced racial prejudice. And because the Hawaiians referred to us as haoles, and we were not really well thought of. So that's only when we went off post. When we were on the post, and this is from 0 to 13 years old. When we were on the post, all service members and their families and their dependents had access to all the facilities, the pools, the churches, the grocery stores, the department stores, everything. So I grew up in an environment where race was just not the measure of an individual any more than the color of their eyes. Only when my dad, when we transferred back to South Carolina, and I started going to the off-post schools, that things looked very different. And that's when I discovered how bad prejudice is. Prejudice is really, to my mind, is nothing more than a tool for the weak to exercise some artificial power over someone who's different. And you can pick your ism. Pick racism, pick feminism, pick ageism, whatever you want to choose. It's artificial power used by the weak. And so I am really opposed to anything that resembles racial equity. And I want to compliment the schools here on Bainbridge Island for having race equity as part of their teaching curriculum.
Okay. Chris, your turn to ask Brenda a question.
Well, you can tell a lot by an individual by the answer to this question. What is your favorite flavor of ice cream? I'm going to give you, it's multiple choice, because that's the kind of person I am. Vanilla, macchiato, raspberry sorbet, or chocolate mint? Want me to say it again?
I like butter pecan.
I gave you 4.
Thank you.
I gave you. You go to more.
Chocolate.
Thank you.
Okay. And then finally, Rasham, a question for Clarence.
Hi, Clarence. So I'll just preface this quickly. Now, having ran 2 campaigns and having served for 4 years, I know that one of the foremost concerns of Bainbridge Island residents is the preservation of our very special island character, rural character, the small town feel of Winslow. I also know, having served on the council for 4 years, that there are substantial growth pressures and pressures from developers that seek to infringe upon that growth creep out into the rural zones, for example. And that still, to this day, in the campaign trail, that is a #1 concern of island residents, and it also relates to the preservation of our groundwater resources. So knowing that you are supported by and endorsed by pro-growth individuals in the community, including some developers, what will you do to protect the rural character of the island, and will you commit to no upzoning if you are elected to a 4-year term?
Well, thank you, Mayor. And first of all, on endorsements and funds, just because a person has a position and wants to support me and give me generously of their donations and contributions does not mean it was a quid pro quo. And to infer that is really insulting to the people who support my candidacy. I have a background. I used to be on the Tukwila City Council over 30 years ago. I was a 32-year-old. I was then the youngest city council member ever in the history of Tukwila. Tukwila could not be more different than Bainbridge Island. It was overdeveloped, South Center Shopping Center even back then, and the rest. But the few areas that we had that were critically important for the environment, I wrote the first sensitive areas ordinance that was done by any municipality in the entire state, years before the Growth Management Act required it. And I've been an environmentalist my entire life. I was on the President's Forest Plan that preserved millions and millions of old growth habitat for the endangered northern spotted owl. It's something core to my belief. And if you elect me to city council, I'm going to make sure that the character is maintained. But to say that all development is bad is incorrect. Development can work in harmony if it's planned well. And actually, some development can actually improve the environment. Winslow Way is an example. That used to be a street that the street water just went straight into Eagle Harbor. But all those little square things, those are catch basins. Those are rain gardens. They filter the street water before they go out into Eagle Harbor. That's by design. So smart design can actually improve our environment and save the quality of life we have. And that's something I would look forward to working on.
Thank you. And Clarence,
Mayor Shum, you made a big deal about opposing the Harrison Hospital, but you've made a lot of claims that I'd like to get facts on. One thing, you say 38% of the budget is for the police, but I've looked at it, and other people smarter than me can't figure out where you got that high of a percentage, so maybe sometime you could share with us your methodology of how you came to that number. Also, you say that you can build a building for $10 to $12 million. Again, where's the methodology? Do you have plans that shows the schematics of how you came about to this 10 to 12 million figure? Do you have an appraisal that's been approved? All of these things. You also claim it's the most expensive police station in the entire country. By the way, you rarely mentioned a municipal court, but I just find it hard to believe that per square foot, Harrison Hospital on Bainbridge Island costs more than the City of New York's police department headquarters in Manhattan, which has by far some of the most expensive real estate per square foot in the entire world. So those are just a few things, and making these claims, but without any backing documentation, I think the voters need to know how you came to those numbers, and I hope you get them to us before the votes arrive next week.
I'm really grateful for that question, and I guess what my opponent doesn't know, and maybe that's my responsibility to have informed you of, is that I do have the numbers, and I've published the numbers. I actually had the opportunity to participate in a town hall May of this year, along with a professor of Seattle University Law School, Dean Spade, who was a professor of policing, and our state representative, Tara Simmons. And the entire focus of that discussion was about policing in general in the Puget Sound region. My contribution to that discussion was Harrison. I produced slides, which I freely shared to any member of the public that asked. The question of where I got the financial documents and information from the city, from the city. You can look up the city's financial documents by yourself online. The city has a really robust financial worksheet and inventory that they maintain. You can also ask the city manager or the finance director for these figures, and they're always happy to give them to you. So that information is on the record. All of the information about Harrison is on the record. What I did that no other council member did was I picked up the phone and I called an architect, and then I called an appraiser, and then I asked about the numbers. And I'll leave you with one thing. One of the appraisers, the architects that I spoke to, who builds police, court, fire facilities, said, you want a comparable for cost? You want to really understand how much the city overpaid by? Look at Fire 21. That's the new fire building up on Madison. That built in 2018 for $323 a foot. If we build Harrison, it will build out at $1,300 a foot. So tell me, it doesn't take a mathematician, it doesn't take someone knowing calculus or even an expert in the industry to know that these figures are wrong. There's something wrong. There's something wrong with why the city came to make the decision that it made. If you're curious about the numbers, contact me. I'd be happy to have a phone call with you, Clarence, and provide you with these figures. I'm happy to provide them to any member of the public that asks. It's a really important discussion. I push it because, again, it highlights one of the most significant problems at City Hall that I am very proud to have worked to begin to change. Thank you.
Thank you. It's 6:30. I'd like to ask for a 1-minute response to sort of a wrap-up question. It's basically, what do you believe is the biggest challenge facing the new council, and what would you do to address that challenge? The single biggest challenge for the new council. Chris, we'll start with you, and 1 minute, and then we'll wrap it up.
I'm not sure I'll need a minute, but there's a couple of things that we face going forward. And one is not about growth itself, but how do we manage to growth? It's very important that we get out ahead of that problem, not react to the problem once it's upon us. So it's a whole blend of high-speed communications, transportation, multimodal transportation, and get the funding sources aligned with development of good neighborhood architectures and green building so that we can get to the greenhouse gases. I think the climate and growth are the two big things that council has to face. I look forward to it.
Thank you. Brenda?
Well, I agree that we have a lot of big issues, but I don't think we're going to be able to solve any of them if we don't come together as a council and learn to be civil to each other. And that seems to be the biggest problem that I think we face. We're cutting each other down instead of bringing each other in and trying to figure out what is it that the people want. We're there to serve, not to have hidden agendas or backdoor deals or none of that. That is not why we're there.
Thank you. Clarence, why don't we go to you?
This isn't the first time I've been asked to run for city council. People have asked me 15 years ago. And the first thing I'd say to them is, hey, wait a second. I thought you liked me. And the reason why I say that is people have concerns about our city, and this is why I'm running. I want good governance. I want to bring back trust and faith that we're doing the right decisions. My 30-year career has worked in government from the President Clinton, governor's office, 30 state senators, Congressman Jay Inslee, Sound Transit, the Kitsap County Commissioners, and of course, I was a Tukwila City Council member. And why I'm mentioning that is all these elected officials are held to the highest standards because they're public officials. Highest standards of accountability, truth, transparency, and honesty. And I pledge to you, if elected, that I will stand up for all the norms, rules, regulations, and ethics that govern all elected officials from the president down to Bainbridge Island City Council.
Thank you. Rasham?
Yeah, I agree that the biggest issues facing the incoming council in 2022 are going to be the same issues that were facing the council when I ran in 2017. It's growth pressures, it's climate change, it's adequate protection of our groundwater resources. But underlying that is a more fundamental issue that's going to continue to face the incoming council next year, and I highlighted those to you in my opening comments. And that's the health and stability of the administration. That's working to build a city that works for the citizens of Bainbridge Island. That's working to elect people, council members, that listen to your concerns and actually take action to address them. Basic common sense stuff. We need to move away from this big picture, big thinking, and back down to basics. We need to start providing for the needs of our island residents. I feel like we have ignored that for far too long. I'm running for re-election, as I said, because I know the work that needs to be done, because I understand the problems now. I don't need to warm up to the job. I'm there. I'm in the building. I hope that you can continue to support me to do this work for another 4 years. Thank you very much.
Kent?
I would agree that the most important thing is managing growth. And again, going back to ECHO, it's aligning the comp plan with the land use regulations. What this means is growth in areas that already have transit and services. But there's a couple other things that are fundamental. One is, as has been said, I want to contribute to a civil and professional dialogue. And all the things that any of you would contribute and want to do, honesty, the transparency, these are things that I hold true, and I think that my professional career holds and shines a light on as being true. And I think one of the bottom lines that we've talked about today that is as important is just economic diversity on the island. We all came here with different amounts of money, we came here with different resources, and we're lucky enough to be here. And I think that we have to work hard to contribute to those people who are like us when we arrived, as 30-year-olds, to make the island accessible to all.
Thank you. John?
The biggest challenge that the council faces will also be faced by citizens. We have planning to do. There are plans that have already been formulated and that the council has committed to. The climate action plan, there's a long history there. Sustainable transportation plan, there's a long history there of people working on those plans. But in the remainder of this year and really getting started next year, the housing action plan and the update of the Winslow master plan, those are two overlapping, enormous and potentially contentious planning processes. And they will require a lot of citizen engagement, and the council needs to be paying attention all along the way, doing their part in directing and shaping the eventual outcome of those complex undertakings.
Thank you. Joe, why not?
Sorry, 1 minute, right? Okay, well, hold the mic, I learned that. So, relating to council dynamics, I'm actually, I don't need to repeat, what everyone knows, the past of council, but I was really impressed how we, council, came together when we allocated the $7 million of ARPA funds. We were cohesive, we were collaborative, and I think we came out with a really good result. So this to me is a sign of people working together, and I get reelected. This is what you can expect from me, that collaborative, inclusive approach in a second term. You'll see that continue with me. But let's just say, I want to talk about climate change. The climate action plan implementation is our #1 priority that council agreed to, and that is, I am devoted to working really hard in that implementation, and I'm doing so now. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ron?
Thank you. So I agree with all these. There's so much that needs to be done, but we have one issue that's festering, and it's like a stuck needle on a vinyl record. It's the police and court facility. And those aren't big priorities for me, but the thing is, they make our city council, our government look dysfunctional, that we can't make a decision and move forward with something. So if I'm elected, let's say when I'm elected, I'm going to meet with my colleagues, as many of them as I can, and I'm going to say, how do we agree on a process that we can put into motion, and we're going to make a decision, and we're going to move forward. We won't all like it. I might not like it, but we need to make a decision and move forward on our police and court facility, because it's just been going on and on and on, and it's just a sign of dysfunction. It needs to get put to rest so we can get on to these other things.
Thank you. That concludes it. If you guys want to hang around afterwards and speak to individuals, I think we can keep this open for a little while.
7.5, no, yeah.
Okay. But I want to thank Sal, Pascal, and Justin for helping out. Really appreciate it. And you guys, too.